Well, among the flurry of executive orders signed by President Biden over the last couple of weeks was one that essentially freezes new oil and gas drilling on federal lands. It's a move aimed not only at conservation, but also on eventually having this nation become less dependent on fossil fuels.
Yeah, tonight our Michael Gibson speaks with two of the state's key players in the business who say a conversation is needed between the White House and the oil industry to save jobs and keep the country energy independent.
President Joe Biden signed an executive order that put a stop to oil and gas leasing on federal lands and waters. It was just one of several executive actions the president has taken over climate change. In response, Governor Greg Abbott signed his own executive order directing every state agency to use all lawful powers and tools to challenge any federal action that threatens the continued strength, vitality, and independence of the energy industry.
Unfortunately, the federal actions will have a negative impact on Texas, and if they're carried through to completely ban and stop leasing on federal lands, it does include the offshore development.
That's Todd Staples, who's the president of the Texas Oil and Gas Association. We set up a Zoom conference with Staples and Port of Corpus Christi CEO Sean Strawbridge. We wanted to get their reaction to the new administration's plans, which focus on not only curtailing the oil and gas industry, but promoting alternative energy sources in an effort to fight climate change.
And we're years away from being more dependent on renewables than we are on fossil fuels. So, some of these actions are going to hurt American jobs.
Staples is worried that if the administration tries to move away from oil and gas too quickly, the economy will suffer and folks will lose jobs, especially here in Texas.
People in the oil and natural gas industry love their jobs. They're some of the highest paying jobs in Texas. And these other jobs are just not out there. Otherwise, you would have people fleeing to those jobs.
Some of those good-paying jobs are out drilling for oil in the Gulf of Mexico. That aspect of the industry produces 300,000 jobs, according to an estimate by the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And while the president has paused any new federal leases, he did say during the 2020 presidential campaign that there would be no more drilling on federal lands. He said, quote, "No more drilling, including offshore. No ability for the oil industry to continue to drill. Period. Ends." End quote.
The reality is the oil and natural gas industry is going to be the industry that delivers these future energy sources that meet our needs. Texas today, our power generation supply is a little bit over 50% from natural gas. It's almost 25% from wind. So if the president wants an example of where to look on how to grow jobs, grow our economy, and to diversify our energy portfolio, you need to look no further than the Lone Star State.
These oil and gas industry leaders say they look forward to having a conversation with the president and members of his administration in coming up with a well-balanced plan that protects the environment and oil field jobs. Michael Gibson, 3 News.